Today we will discuss about the changes that happens in respiration during exercise. If you have seen my previous lectures on the topic regulation of respiration, then this concept it will be very easier for you. So we have the cerebral cortex here. This is the frontal view of the brain, and here you have the midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata, then brainstem and spinal cord. You have the brainstem here, then you have cerebellum on the posterior side, and in the previous lecture we also discussed that during an activity the motor neurons from the muscle, it will transfer through the ascending tract through the corticospinal pathway to the cerebral cortex. So on the way to the cerebral cortex, it will give some signals to the respiratory center, and the respiratory center is activated. When you start an exercise, what really happens is the action potential, that is the signal from your cerebral cortex, it will pass through the corticospinal pathway in the descending tract, and it will go to the motor neurons in the vertebrae C1, C2 and C3. From the motor neurons, it will combine together to form a nerve known as phrenic nerve, and it will supply the diaphragm muscle, and the function is contraction of the diaphragm. So the same signal it will pass to the lower vertebra and to the motor neurons, and these motor neurons combine together to form a nerve known as intercostal nerve, and it will supply the intercostal muscles, and the function is contraction of the intercostal muscles. And the same signal it will go down the brainstem to the upper motor neuron, and from the nerve motor neuron it will go to the muscles in the neuromuscular junction. So this is what happens first, and during your exercise there is an activity already started from the locomotor system, such as your muscle spindle, Golgi tendon, then your joint capsule, then ligaments. The sensory neurons from this locomotor system combine, and it will go as a proprioception receptor through the ascending tract through the brainstem and go through the corticospinal pathway to the cerebral cortex. And the way this proprioception receptor signal also gives some signals to the inspiratory center, such a way it will activate the inspiratory center. So what are these signals? Whenever the action potential from the cerebral cortex or from the proprioception receptors, these signals is known as the collateral connection. So whenever there is an muscle activity, or whenever there is an activity in the body, first the signal from the corticospinal pathway, it will activate your respiratory center through the collateral connection, and from the proprioception receptors from the locomotor system, it will send its signal through the proprioception receptors through the ascending tract in the brainstem to the corticospinal pathway to the cerebral cortex. So on the way there will also a collateral connection So such a way the respiratory system is activated. So whenever you exercise, there will be increased consumption of oxygen and there will be increased production of CO2 and there will be increased ventilation. So what do you mean by this ventilation? Ventilation means the air you inspire and expire, it is ventilation. So in exercise you will inspire more air and you will expire more air out, so that is ventilation. So here why there is increased consumption of oxygen? It is because we have already seen in the previous lecture, in cells inside the tissues, the cells need energy. So this energy is achieved through the breakdown of bigger molecules with the help of oxygen. So for the energy is carried by the ATP, adenosine triphosphate, and adenosine triphosphate is formed from the ADP, and this ADP is from the breakdown of bigger molecules such as glucose with the help of oxygen. So there should be more oxygen consumption to produce ADP, then ATP, then the energy for the cells. So during breakdown of the bigger molecules, there will be production of carbon dioxide also. So here you can see during exercise, in normal person there will be increased consumption of oxygen and increased production of carbon dioxide. During exercise there will be more consumption of O2 and there will be more production of CO2, that is oxygen and carbon dioxide. So now during exercise always know that the partial pressure of oxygen and partial pressure of carbon dioxide, it will never change in the arterial blood. Always know this one. This is an important concept during exercise. And the pH, it will also not change, but given the circumstances during severe exercise, the pH may change. Because what happens in severe exercise? In severe exercise, if the arterial blood, if the partial pressure of oxygen and the partial pressure of carbon dioxide and pH, if there is no change in the arterial blood, and during severe exercise, what happens? The muscle tissue, it will need more oxygen and it will produce more carbon dioxide. So basically what happens is, if there are more carbon dioxide produced and more oxygen are consumed inside the muscle tissue cells, in severe exercise, increase in the carbon dioxide, it will combine with the water and it will form bicarbonate and hydrogen ions. These hydrogen ions will increase inside the blood, and whenever this hydrogen ion increase, it means there is more acid. That means due to the increased production of carbon dioxide, these acids it will go and deposit in the parts of the body as lactic acid, phosphoric acid, sulfuric acid, etc. So this is what we call as metabolic acidosis. So in order to balance this metabolic acidosis, what happens is there will be hyperventilation. So hyperventilation means that, so you need to pass out more carbon dioxide so that this acid formation will not happen. So pH is an exception, but overall in the arterial blood, the partial pressure of oxygen, carbon dioxide and pH, it will never change. during mild moderate exercise, but during severe exercise the pH may change, and given the situation in severe exercise, there will be small fluctuations in PO2 and CO2, but only during very severe, that is intense workout without any rest. So there is no change in the partial pressure of oxygen carbon dioxide in the arterial blood. So what happens in the venous blood? The oxygen is consumed inside the cells and there will be production of carbon dioxide, so there will be increase in the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the venous blood. So if there is increase in the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the venous blood, automatically there is decrease in the partial pressure of oxygen. So this venous blood, this chemical changes in the venous blood, it will not play any role in the control of respiration during exercise, because there are chemoreceptors we have discussed in the regulation of respiration topic that can sense the small changes in the small chemical changes in the arterial blood, that is the partial pressure of oxygen, partial pressure of carbon dioxide, and the pH, that is it is increased hydrogen ion or decreased hydrogen ion. So normally this venous blood, it has no role in controlling, or these values are of no importance when it comes to respiration during exercise. So the main role is played by the nervous system, central nervous system, that is the neuronal stimulation of the inspiratory center. It will maintain the increased ventilation and increased muscle work and increased production of carbon dioxide and increased consumption of oxygen, all in a balanced state. So the system plays an important role in respiration during exercise. In exercise, that there is increased ventilation. So what is this ventilation? Ventilation is the tidal volume multiplied by the respiratory rate. Now what do you mean by this tidal volume? Tidal volume is the amount of air you breathe in per respiration and amount of air you breathe out per respiration, that is known as tidal volume. Normally you will breathe in 500 ml of air. So what happens during exercise? You will breathe in more than 500 ml of air. So what is this respiratory rate? Respiratory rate, from the name that is the number of times you breathe in and breathe out per respiration, that is total respiratory rate. So just take an example. When you start an exercise, you will have a deep inspiration and a deep expiration. So basically what you are doing is you are breathing in more air and breathing out more air. So there is increased tidal volume when you start an exercise. At the end of the exercise, what happens is your respiratory rate will increase, that is the number of times you breathe in and breathe out will increase. So tidal volume will increase in the early phase of exercise and your respiratory rate will increase at the late phase of exercise. Whenever your tidal volume increases and respiratory rate increases, ventilation also increases. So you know that the normal cardiac output is 5 liters per minute. During exercise, the cardiac output is 6 to 7 times the normal. That is, in a normal, the cardiac output is 5 liters per minute. During exercise, it is 6 to 7 times the normal. So that is 30 to 35 liters of blood is pumped during exercise. So let us go to the lungs. In lungs, you know that this is from the pulmonary artery, and these are the pulmonary capillaries, and this is the pulmonary vein, and here you have the alveolar sac. So in pulmonary capillaries you have precapillary sphincters. So what do you mean by these precapillary sphincters? These precapillary sphincters are muscle vasculatures. What do you mean by this is, if this is a capillary, these sphincter vasculatures, precapillary sphincters, usually are open very narrow, not open very broad, but it is very narrow, basically slightly close. So in a normal resting person with a normal blood flow of 5 liters per minute, the blood will pass through this narrowly opened, that is slightly closed precapillary sphincters, and the blood passes through these precapillary sphincters to the alveoli for the exchange of gases. So in gravity, under the influence of gravity, in an upright standing person, that when you are standing, how the blood passes through your pulmonary capillaries. So in lungs you have the upper segment, middle segment, and the lower segment. So when you are standing in upright position, what happens is, under the influence of gravity, more blood will go to the lower segment and some medium will go to the middle segment, and very low will go to the upper segment. Very low will go to the upper segment. So basically what you have is, here in the lower segment there will be more blood flow, and middle segment also there will be medium blood flow. So here you will have in both the segments increased, if there is an increased blood flow, there is increased perfusion and increased gas exchange, etc. So but here in the upper segment you have very small blood flow going through the upper segment. So basically you have only the air movement, that is oxygen and carbon dioxide movement only, but there will be very less perfusion and increased ventilation, because there will be air movement. Due to low blood flow, there won't be any perfusion or gases exchange. There will be, but it is very very small. So that is known as physiological dead space, that is there is some ventilation is lost due to very small blood flow. So that is known as physiological dead space. So in the upper segment, that is apical segment of the lungs, there is increased physiological dead space. So as I told earlier, whenever there is high blood flow, increased blood flow, you will have more perfusion and ventilation. So what is the normal ventilation perfusion value? It is 0.8 here. So what is the value of ventilation perfusion in the lower segment? It should be more than 0.8. what is the value here in the upper segment? It should be less than 0.8. So what happens during exercise? There is 6 to 7 times the normal cardiac output. That is, instead of 5 liters per minute, your heart will pump 30 to 35 liters of blood. So when 30 to 35 liters of blood is pumped, the blood in the pulmonary artery, it will be more. It will be 30 to 35 liters. So there will be more blood flow to the upper segment, to the middle segment and the lower segment. So if there is more blood flow, what happens? There is increased perfusion, there is increased ventilation, there is increased gas exchange, the same in middle segment and the same in the upper segment. So here during exercise the physiological dead space will be very low, and the ventilation perfusion value, it remains same, 0.8, 0.8 and 0.8. that is, during exercise the ventilation perfusion is uniform. And also when there is 30 to 35 liters of blood flowing through the pulmonary capillaries, what happened to the precapillary sphincter is the narrowly opened precapillary sphincters, that is slightly closed precapillary sphincters will open, that is, it will open broadly, so that this 30 to 35 liters can pass through easily. And when I say perfusion, what do you mean by perfusion? Perfusion means it's diffusion, that is diffusion of gases from the higher concentration gradient to the lower concentration gradient. During exercise this 30 to 35 liters of blood also flows through the arteries. So in arteries there will be increased flow of blood, but note that there is increased flow of blood, but the partial pressure of oxygen and the partial pressure of carbon dioxide and the pH, it remains unchanged. It will never change during exercise. When there is 6 to 7 liters of blood flow in the body, that means 6 to 7 liters of blood flowing through the arteries and also through the venous system. So when blood flows through the, that is the 30 to 35 liters of blood flow through the arteries, the partial pressure of oxygen, carbon dioxide and pH, it will never change, but here when the arteries blood enters the tissue, there will be more production of carbon dioxide from the tissue cell metabolism. So here in the venous blood, as I have discussed this earlier, the partial pressure of carbon dioxide can increase depending upon the type of your physical exercise. So what is the normal partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the venous blood? The normal is 45 is the normal value in the venous blood. So during mild to moderate exercises there might be small fluctuations in the partial pressure of carbon dioxide, and during severe exercises this normal value can increase even above 46. So the same way, what is the normal partial pressure of oxygen in the venous blood? It is 40. So during severe exercise what happens is this partial pressure of oxygen can drop even very lower. So in severe exercise you will have more level of partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the venous blood. So when this venous blood go to the alveoli in the pulmonary capillaries, what happens is there is increased partial pressure of carbon dioxide, and more carbon dioxide will move to the alveoli of the lungs. So do not think that when the increased partial pressure of carbon dioxide move through the alveoli of the lungs, the alveoli partial pressure also increases. Do not think like that, because what is the normal value of partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the alveoli? It is 40. So whenever there is more partial pressure of carbon dioxide during severe exercise, that is more than 46, this alveolar value remains unchanged, because during exercise you will not only have increased blood flow, you will also have increased ventilation. So this increased carbon dioxide in the venous blood, it will be balanced by the increased ventilation. So the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide in the alveolar sac, it will remain as 40. So please do not confuse with that. Here the partial pressure of oxygen in the alveoli of the lung is 104. I have mentioned this many times, that the partial pressure of oxygen in the arterial blood is 100, and then when it travels through the pulmonary capillaries, when it travels 1/3 of the pulmonary capillary, there will be venous admixture, and the partial pressure of oxygen drops to 95. I have mentioned this many times during my lecture. So what basically this means, when I say 1/3 of the pulmonary capillary, you divide the pulmonary capillary into 3 divisions, that is first division, second division and third division. When the blood from the alveoli, when it flows through the first division, what is the partial pressure of oxygen? It is 100. And what is the hemoglobin saturation? It is 100%. So after traveling this first division of the pulmonary capillary, what happens is, here is the venous admixture. So here the partial pressure of oxygen automatically drops to 95, and hemoglobin saturation drops to 97%. But when there is heavy blood flow, that is 30 to 35 liters of blood flow instead of 5 liters, normally what happens is, the 3 divisions in the pulmonary capillaries, due to the high amount of blood flow in the 3 divisions, the partial pressure of the oxygen will remain 100, and the hemoglobin saturation also remain 100% due to the high blood flow through the pulmonary capillaries. So this when it goes to the arterial blood, the partial pressure remain unchanged. That is, the partial pressure of oxygen is 100, partial pressure of carbon dioxide is 40, and the pH 7.4. We will see what are the changes that occurred in the lungs during exercise. That is, during exercise there is an increased blood flow. Due to the increased blood flow, there is increased diffusion, that is the perfusion, and increased gases exchange, and there is a decrease in the physiological dead space, and the blood flowing through the pulmonary capillaries is 100, the partial pressure of oxygen is 100 and hemoglobin saturation is 100% in all 3 divisions of the pulmonary capillaries, and also the ventilation perfusion is uniform in the upper, middle and lower segment, and the precapillary sphincters also widely open. So these are the changes during exercise in the lungs. So what happens in the tissue? In tissue also, if there is increased blood flow, in tissue also there will be increased blood flow. So if there is increased blood flow, there is increased perfusion, and there is increased number of functional and exchange microcirculatory vasculary beds, same as we have seen in the lungs, that is the precapillary sphincters. And in tissue, we have discussed this already. There is decreased affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen in the tissues. The same concept with oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. Whenever you do exercise, the temperature will increase, the pH will increase, and your carbon dioxide, partial pressure of carbon dioxide level also increases, your oxygen level will decrease, partial pressure of oxygen level will decrease, etc. So the same concept, if you have studied the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve, you know that curve, it will shift to, this is the linear curve, it will shift to right. But after exercise, what happens? After severe exercise, there is still hyperventilation. It is due to the oxygen depth. So what is this oxygen depth? Oxygen depth is after severe exercise, even though after all these processes your tissue will need oxygen because of that severe exercise, so there will be hyperventilation to provide more oxygen. So this you will see in the biochemistry, that in oxygen depth the aerobic respiration will shift to anaerobic respiration, and there will be production of lactic acid, and this lactic acid combines with the incoming oxygen molecules from the hyperventilation after the severe exercise, and in that way the oxygen is settled in the tissue cells. This is oxygen depth. You will see this oxygen depth concept in the biochemistry. So that's it for today's topic on respiration during exercise.